We have the hottest new candidate of 2026, Texas, James Talarico. If a year ago we had asked everyone we knew in politics outside the state of Texas about James Talarico, would have gotten a blank stare. But now most of them know exactly who we're talking about. He's running for the United States Senate for a seat now held by John Cornyn, who faces a tough primary. So Republican, I think Lloyd Bentsen was the last Democrat elected to the Senate from the state of Texas, and that was almost 40 years ago. Why can you change that? Why is it different now? Why are you different?
Well, there is a backlash growing in Texas against the extremism and the corruption that we're seeing at all levels of our government. And I'm seeing it everywhere I go. I've held rallies and town halls from Beaumont to El Paso, from Amarillo to Brownsville, and everywhere in between, red areas, blue areas alike. And we've had to move venues because we have so many people who are interested in showing up and joining this campaign. And I think it's because people are hungry for someone who's going to take on the corporate special interests, the billionaire mega donors who control our politics. And I've shown that I can do that in the state legislature, where I fought tooth and nail against the billionaires who are trying to dismantle public education. I fought to cap insulin at $25 a month. And I passed the largest housing bill in recent memory to make it easier for young people to afford their own home. And so that's the kind of leadership people are looking for in the Democratic Party. I think our people-powered campaign in Texas is inspiring folks across the political spectrum to take back our government and take back our state.
Now, to get there, you got to win a primary.
That's right.
And I watched the debate about a week ago, I guess, with Congresswoman Crockett. Why you instead of her?
Well, I have great love and respect for the Congresswoman, and she and I served together in the State House. But I do think I bring something unique to this primary race. I have a history of winning difficult races. I first got elected to the State House by flipping a Trump district that no one thought was winnable. All the party bosses told me that it was a lost cause. They said, this Talarico kid's a nice guy, but he's got no chance of winning in Williamson County, Texas. And I shocked the political establishment by bringing people together, Democrats, independents, Republicans, and new voters, particularly young voters who had felt disillusioned with the system. And we won that seat with 51% of the vote. And I was able to win that seat again when I was running for re-election, even though the Republicans spent more than $1 million to try to beat me. And so I'm the only candidate in this race who has competed in a tough general election and who has won competitive general election races. And I think we have a moral imperative to win this race in November, because if we don't win, we can't help people. If we don't win, we can't stop the extremism that we're seeing in Washington, D.C. And I'm the only candidate in the race who has shown that I can win races like this.
I'm going to turn it over to one of the great advocates of you got to win.
That's right.
James Carville.
I mean, this is a singular purpose of politics, but you're 36 years old, am I correct?
That's right.
Okay. So you're obviously a talented, I mean this complimentary, crafty, ambitious kind of guy. Why are you a Democrat? But I mean, in a state that famously doesn't elect Democrats, and you're one, why?
Well, I was born to a single mom who left an abusive relationship to protect me and to provide for me. Mm-hmm. She worked overtime at a hotel to give me a better life. And when I was 5 years old, she told me that we were Democrats because Democrats fight for the people. I remember her telling me this. And that has stuck with me to this day, because the Democratic Party at its best fights for the little guy, fights for the working men and women in Texas and across this country who just want a fair shot at the American dream. And our party hasn't always lived up to that, especially in recent years. But I think if we can rediscover our roots as a party, those roots that go back into the New Deal, back into the Great Society, then I really do think we can transform this country and restructure this economy so that it can work for regular people like my mom.
So you were in the Texas legislature, you representative of a very tough district. Were you able to get things done in spite of the fact that you were in a, almost veto-proof minority?
Yeah. It's not an easy place to work as a Democrat, the Texas legislature. But I was not only able to confront Republican extremism, I have single-handedly killed harmful Republican bills on the floor of the House. I led the quorum break last summer to shine a national spotlight on their redistricting power grab. I've called out my Republican colleagues when they use my Christian faith to hurt our neighbors. But I also know how to work across the aisle and find common ground and actually get stuff done, because at the end of the day, that's what my constituents expect. They expect me to fight and they expect me to deliver. I feel like in the Democratic Party, we're presented with this false choice of, do we fight or do we deliver? Effective leaders, effective senators can and should do both. And I've shown in a difficult environment, even maybe more difficult than the United States Senate, that I'm able to do both. I passed the first ever cap on insulin copays in state history. I passed the largest early childhood education bill in recent memory. I passed a major housing bill just last year that's going to make home ownership a reality for more people in our state, particularly more young people, because owning your own home is really feels like an impossibility for millennials and for Gen Zers. So that's the kind of leadership I think I bring to this race, and the kind of leadership I would bring to the U.S. Senate.
You mentioned something else, your faith.
Yes.
And I've covered politics for a long, long time, and most Democrats don't talk about faith. Even George McGovern and Fritz Mondale, who were ministers' kids and really had and it was almost like, we don't want to do that, it will offend people. You're quite different about that. So talk about why you're talking about it and what effect you think it's having.
Well, my faith is central in my life. It's the most important thing to me. My granddad was a Baptist preacher in South Texas. And when I was little, he told me that we're supposed to follow Jesus's 2 commandments, to love God and to love neighbor. He always said Christianity is a simple religion, not an easy religion, but a simple religion, because we have these 2 commandments to follow. And that second commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself, is why I went into public service. First, as a public school teacher on the west side of San Antonio, one of the poorest zip codes in the entire state of Texas. It's why I serve as a public official in the state house. And it's why I'm running for the U.S. Senate. I'm trying to make my neighbor's life a little easier and a little better through public policy. And that's how I live out my faith, because as Scripture tells us, faith without works is dead. And I am trying to embody those values in the halls of power. I will just say, though, I am the fiercest defender of the separation of church and state in the Texas Capitol. Not despite my faith, but because of it. I was raised that separation in the First Amendment is sacred, because it doesn't just protect the state, it protects the church. Because when the church gets too cozy with politicians and political power, the church loses its prophetic voice. So we cannot allow one party to speak for Christianity, because neither party has a monopoly on our faith.
That's a threat, really, to the politically aligned religious right, though, isn't it? Because they have taken a totally different view. They become very politicized.
Well, and they get the order wrong, because our politics should grow out of our faith. You know, if you think about Jimmy Carter, if you think about Dr. King, Cesar Chavez, Dorothy Day, Mr. Rogers, these people, their lives were informed by their faith. Their faith is what shaped their politics. Right now, on the religious right, Christian nationalism, you see people's faith growing out of their politics, right? They're baptizing their partisanship, and they're calling that Christianity. And it's why it doesn't resemble the life, death, and teachings of Jesus Christ, right? These Christians in Congress, these Christian nationalists, they want a Christian nation unless it means providing health care to the sick, unless it means funding food assistance for the hungry, or raising the minimum wage for the poor. I mean, none of their policies resemble the teachings of Jesus. And so I'm trying to call out that inconsistency. I'm not a perfect Christian by any stretch of the imagination. Just like all of us, I'm struggling to follow the way of Jesus. But I do think we have to speak out when powerful people pervert our religion for their own political and financial gain.
And Jesus never said, "Blessed are the private equity."
I must have missed that part. Yeah.
You know, I think you made a very important point. Christianity is to live like and everybody has a different definition of true Christian. And I've always thought that the most controversial figure in Christianity and religion is actually Jesus himself, because we confront what he actually told us.
Right.
We can't live. We can't, if you say, honestly, I think I'm right. If somebody asks you for your coat or your shirt, you give them your coat.
That's
I
right.
mean, you're
right.
supposed to sell everything
That's right.
and go out and live amongst the poor.
That's right.
And I don't know how we got so perverted to believe in that Jesus was banging a pulpit on Sunday morning telling people how sinful they were.
Right. Right.
It's never struck me as being, and Jesus himself was the most non-judgmental guy. If you think of what he actually said, and,
Right.
judge not lest you be judged, let Jesus out of sin, cast the first stone. I just did something. Where did we lose that? Was that just too hard a way to live? And we just sort of became to use it as our own crutch.
Yeah. I think Jesus should challenge all of us. He should make all of us uncomfortable. Even those of us who are progressive, like Jesus should challenge our politics. And Christianity should make us uncomfortable. If you're comfortable in your Christianity, then you're doing it wrong. And those teachings that you mentioned, they push me. Jesus told us to sell all our possessions and give the money to the poor. I have a home. I have stuff. I got a car. I got a pickup truck that I like. I got my cell phone.
Nice.
Right? Yeah, I got my blazer. So, like I said, I'm not living up to the radical teachings of Jesus Christ. But I do think that 2,000 years later, he is still pushing us to be better neighbors, to look out for the poor, the marginalized, the oppressed, the vulnerable, to stand up to powerful people. We oftentimes think of Jesus as this really nice, polite, gentle person, which he was, of course. But when people were hurting his neighbors, he walked into the seat of power and he flipped over the tables of injustice. That was a powerful example of nonviolent direct action, protest. And it's what got him killed. The Roman Empire didn't kill Jesus for being a nice guy. He was a threat to their wealth and their power. And so, again, that should unsettle us in the wealthiest country in the world. We should be asking ourselves, what does it mean to truly follow these teachings? Are we really looking out for the least of these? And I think when you look at our current government, you look at our current society, the answer is a resounding no. So instead of putting the 10 Commandments in every classroom, instead of forcing school children to read the Bible against their wills, why don't we, all of us, look inward and figure out how we can be more Christ-like, even when it's uncomfortable?
And that applies to Muslims and Hindus. And
Listen,
Jews
I have.
This is, they can learn a lot from Jesus.
I have met so many Hindus, Buddhists, Sikh, Jews, Muslims, atheists, agnostics who are more Christ-like than some of the Christians I serve with in the Texas legislature. It is about how you treat other people. Matthew 25, people who haven't read their Bible in a while.
You're not thinking of Ken Paxton. He's Attorney General.
Yeah, well, he follows the 10 Commandments rather than the 10 Commandments. But Matthew 25 tells us exactly how we're going to be judged and how we're going to be saved. By feeding the hungry, by healing the sick, by welcoming the stranger, which is more timely now than it's ever been before. There's nothing in Matthew 25 about reading your Bible. There's nothing about going to church. There's nothing about being a good Christian. It is all about how you treat other people. And so I've met a lot of people from different faith traditions, people who aren't religious at all, who embody that teaching better than some of the really loud Christians that we have in public office.
James?
Well, I'm just going to make a general observation. I'm watching this political cycle unfold, and I'm very encouraged and very encouraged. But people need to know, and I think you're a prime example of the staggering amount of talent that we have in the Democratic Party today. And I'm so excited and enthusiastic about your campaign because if you don't win the election, you haven't done anything. All right. We have learned that in 2024, that winning itself is its own philosophy. And we're just delighted to have you on our show. I'm delighted to be able to help your campaign, both in the primary and the general election. And I think that you and a lot of other people, just at the time when we were at our low point, the Calvary rode in. And let me tell you, Jim, you're at the very vanguard of the Calvary that's right again. I think you're going to do great things for Texas. I think you're going to do great things for the United States. I think you're going to help us brand our party what it should be. And that's the party that stands up for people who want power and don't quite have it yet.
That's right.
In every way.
And responsibly, no, that's a bad term. admirably bringing faith back to the public square. FDR talked about his faith all the time. And somehow that's been lost in the last 40 or 50 years. So, James Carville, it's been a treat to have him on today. And I'm not going to say the next senator from Texas, but that's what I really believe. So,
okay, I appreciate it.
James Talarico, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, good deal.